Hello everyone. In this video we will discuss how to design tree-structured vector quantizer. The number of comparisons in tree-structured vector quantizers is 2 into log m instead of m. For a full search you require m comparisons, but in tree-structured vector quantizer technique you require in only 2 into log m comparisons. Now the consequences of tree-structured vector quantizer are increase in distortion. Why? Because we might not get the reconstruction point or vector that is closest to the input vector. Tree-structured vector quantizer requires twice the memory required by conventional vector quantizer, because you will store twice number of code vectors as compared to full search case, right? So the question is how to design tree-structured vector quantizer. The computational complexity is reduced by imposing a tree structure on vector quantizer. So instead of imposing this structure after vector quantizer has been designed, it makes sense to design vector quantizer in framework of the tree structure. So algorithm used here for the designing of a tree-structured vector quantizer is a splitting design approach proposed by Linde, and it is slightly modified here. The first step of the algorithm is to obtain the average of all the training vectors to get the first code vector. How will you get the first code vector? Taking the average of all the training vectors. Now there is one fixed perturbation vector. This perturbation vector is added to the first code vector to obtain second vector. Now you have two code vectors, right? First is obtained using average of the training vectors, and second is obtained by adding fixed perturbation vector to the first vector. Now use these code vectors to form a two-level vector quantizer. Here two-level vector quantizer means vector quantizer will have two clusters. Now call these two vectors as V0 and V1 here. V0 and V1, and call the group of training set vectors that would be assigned to each code vectors as G0 and G1. Using this V0 and V1 you will get two clusters G0 and G1, right? So here the group of training vectors that are assigned or quantized to V0 are called as G0, and the group of training vectors that are assigned or quantized to V1 are called G1. Now you have two groups. The next step is to add perturbation vector to code vectors V0 and V1 to get two new code vectors. So there will be four initial vectors for a four-level vector quantizer. So now you have four code vectors. The next step is use G0, that is cluster 0, to design a two-level vector quantizer, and use G1, that is cluster 1, to design another two-level vector quantizer. Label the code vectors as these vectors V00, V01, V10 and V11. Now you will split G0 using V00 and V01 into two groups, G00 and G01. So using these two vectors V00 and V01, you will get two groups G00 and G01 from the initial group G0. Now the next step is to split G1 using these two code vectors V10 and V11 into two groups G10 and G11. So using these code vectors V10 and V11, you will get two groups G10 and G11 from the initial group G1. So you have four groups, right? G00, G01, G10 and G11. Now continue in this manner until we have a required number of output points or code vectors, right? So the algorithm is stopped whenever the number of code vectors are equals to L, right? That is, we have assumed L initially at the starting of algorithm. So this way you can design tree structured vector quantizer, right? Now, what is pruned tree structured vector quantizer? The rate distortion performance of a tree structured vector quantizer can be improved by pruning. What is pruning? Pruning means carefully removing the selected subgroup in the tree so that the size of the codebook is reduced, and so the rate is also reduced. If the size of the codebook is reduced, if you remove some of the code vectors or some of subgroups in the tree, then you will have less number of code vectors in the code book, right? So rate will be also reduced. But this pruning may increase the distortion because you are removing some of the code words, so you might not get the uh, closest code word for the input vector, right? So main objective of pruning is to remove subgroups that will result in the best trade-off between rate and distortion. So this is the main objective of pruning. You only remove those subgroups that will result in best trade-off between rate and distortion. So I hope you understood. That's it for now. Thank you.